if you take a dog, it has certain behaviors. It has categories of behavior, which would be, chewing, eating, all those other things. If you take a bird, it has some similar categories, but it has categories like flying that a dog doesn't have, right? So you have, they're systems of categories. But in some cases, you can cross over systems. So that is, somebody that has, like a human being is very interesting. How many of you have children? And how many of you have had children that have barked and meow and quack like a duck and flap their wings like a bird? It's like, okay, well that's interesting. Those are not necessarily traditional human categories of behavior, but we can expand out beyond that. And in the early days, Bandler and Grinder used to say NLP was all about a learning three. Right? How do you expand out of that? So again, Bateson used it that way, and I thought that was really, really profound. And he said a lot of times, for example, the difference between neurosis and psychosis is that in neurosis it's level 2. I'm anxious about something I shouldn't be anxious about, right? But what happens with this level 3 is you have, again, like in some bipolar things in psychosis, you actually have these shifting of whole categories of behavior. Multiple personality would be an example, forms of schizophrenia. So it's actually a whole confusion of which categories of behavior, which systems of these categories of behavior. And so I thought that was really powerful and made so much sense. And yet, the big challenge is if you say to people learning 1, 2, 3, they kind of get, what's 3 again? What's 1 again? But if you start looking at it, what you realize is and Bateson, by the way, also talked about learning 0. Learning 0 meant basically there is no learning. I just keep doing the same thing, right? I don't change anything. No matter what happens, I just keep doing the same thing. So you would say that's pre-programmed. There's 0 learning. Certain addictions, you could, they, like Robbie says, they fall into this unconscious behavior. There basically is no more learning, no adaptation, no adjustment. Learning 1 is, okay, it's like I have the capability to at least adjust to what I'm doing in a certain place, right? So I can actually reflect on it and go, oh, wrong category, that goes over here. I can sort of reorganize them. And learning 2 would be, I can actually, like I used to say, learning 2, I remember right after 9/11, people stopped flying in airplanes for a while. And it was not because of the slow negative reinforcement of poor service, bad food, It was because suddenly, right, there was a belief it's dangerous. And so immediately, that whole category of things you don't do. So that would be like a learning 2. 1 minute I do it, and the next minute, no, that's not going to do that. It's dangerous. Even though I still have the same capability, I know what to do, I know when to do it. So a learning 3 would be, again, this is where you have these interesting evolutions. We would say, in your own sense of role, of who you are in the world, and that who you are in the world is what I would call the learning. That's where you get to the learning 3. Right? What is my system of possible categories of behavior? So again, if I expand that, I am actually expanding my identity. And Bateson, by the way, also hinted at a learning 4, which would be a completely new category of behavior that has never existed before. So in our world of Silicon Valley, where I grew up, they talk about the difference between evolutionary and revolutionary technology. Right? And evolutionary technology is an improvement on what already exists. Revolutionary technology would be like, digital photography totally revolutionized the photography industry. So suddenly, all these giant companies disappear because it's a little bit like the dinosaurs disappearing, because suddenly there's, the whole ecosystem has shifted. So learning 4 would be, when the first human said the first words, You know, they weren't modeling anybody else. They weren't, you know, it's like something emerges as a brand new possibility. And Bateson said that could never happen simply within the confines of your own nervous system. That can only happen in a collective. So that's where it came from.
Great. Well, that's fascinating.
So the answer is this very specific thing. I remember in 1986, I was in Norway talking to somebody who was also very interested in Bateson. And we said, yeah, I remember saying to this guy, yeah, this is such an important model, but nobody knows about it because it's not inherently practical. I said, somebody should make this practical. And as soon as I said somebody, I went, oh, who is that somebody? So the naming of these things, you know, John Grinder would complain that it's content-oriented, but yes, which is true, but the reason to do that is because people do not hold process very easily, right? If you just say learning one, most people, after a few minutes, it's going to be gone. But if you go, this related to this, now, okay, that I can remember that, and it actually becomes more pragmatically applicable as a map. And it's a map, not a territory, So Robbie.
No, well, thank you. That's fascinating. I always wanted to know. I learned as much about that as you did, because I had no clue where you exactly came up with it. So that's amazing. I'm sure I have a question to supplement that, but I'm just thinking I'm in a mild trance. Yeah. I mean,
that's unusual for you.
Yeah, it's rare that I'm speechless. It's true.